Hi guys, Joe from Total Justice Gaming here with another deck profile for you. Today we're looking at BuddyFight's cutest little bioweapon, Gem Clone. We got a lot to go through because there's a lot of one-ofs in this deck. Thankfully, not as many as I thought there'd be, but still there's a bit. So our BuddyFight is Fake Replica Weapon Gem Clone. We of course got a Secret Flag for J Genesis, being the Zeta Flag to go with it, and we will hop right in. Our buddy is, of course, Gem Clone, so we're going to be running for Gem Clone. This version of Gem Clone is if your flag is Hero World and this is your buddy, you can call impact monsters even from other worlds other than Hero World. Its second ability is counter. During your final phase, you may pay a gauge if you call an impact monster without Gem Clone in its name from your hand without paying its call cost on top of this monster. So this leads us already in just to a world of endless variety with this monster. Very well costed ability. At size 0, we can call 1 and get some different size monsters out. Just really, really versatile. It just makes the deck so much fun. Next up, we're going to be running 4 copies of Gem Clone Wall Replica. This is probably one of the better Gem Clones outside of the original one. It has 2 abilities, both are counter speed. Counter Chain Call. During your final phase, if this card is in your drop zone, if you have an impact monster in the field, pay a life. If you do, put this monster from your drop zone to your hand. You may only do this once per turn. And then counter. During your final phase, you may pay 2 gauge. If you do, call an impact monster without Gem Clone its name from your hand without paying its call cost. So it's a Gem Clone that is self-recurring. For the cost of a life, and it lets you call just for an additional gauge any impact monster we wish. Also leading to a lot of good variety. Lets us keep the pressure on during the final phase. Also, we got 3 copies of Origin Breaker. Sorry, super shiny. Can't help that. This version of Gem Clone is 10,000 power with a crit of 2 and a defense of 5. Its call cost is pay 3 gauge, put an impact monster without Gem Clone in its name in its soul from your field to your drop zone. Pay 3 gauge, put an impact monster with a card without Gem Clone in its name from its soul from your field to the drop zone. When this card enters the field, put up to 1 impact monster from your hand and 2 impact monsters from your drop zone into this card's soul. This card gets all abilities of impact monsters without Gem Clone's name in its soul. So this is your big push for game, much like in the anime. It leads to a very wide scale variety of abilities, from penetrate to double attack to can't be reduced to can't be prevented. Just a very, very large variety of things. Things can happen with this one that's causing end games. So we're, of course, going to be running this out of 3 of. Next up, we are running the new card. We're going to be running 2 copies of Gem Clone SD. This version of Gem Clone is much like all the others, save for Origin Breaker, a 001. Counter speed, final trance. During your final phase, choose an impact monster without Gem Clone in its name from your drop zone. Pay 2 gauge and a life. If you do, call the chosen card without paying its call cost. You may only use final trance once per turn. This lets me get anything I want out of the drop zone that's already been killed, put it back into play. For 2 gauge and a life, it's a little expensive, but still it's just as good. Unlike Replica Wall, it's from the drop zone, so that means old monsters that have already been killed off, we can put into play again pretty easily. Recursion's always a good thing, especially with the amount of monsters that we have in this deck. So, that being said, we are running him right now at a 2 of, because he does cost 2 gauge in a life. But we're going to see if we can even out Replica Wall and SD to a 3 and 3 suite. So we'll move right along. Following up for non-Gem Clones, we have 4 copies of the Gem Clone specific Zeta. Battle Demon of Revenge Zeta. He is 11-4. Not too bad in terms for Zetas. Call cost is pay 3 gauge. If you are transformed into this card cannot be destroyed nor returned to hand. You cannot call monsters other than impact monsters, and you may call any number of impact monsters this turn. Also, all impact monsters with Gem Clone in their name cannot be destroyed nor returned to hand by your opponent's effects. His impact transform cost is 2. So this guards all of our Zetas from out of play destruction or bounce effects. They can still snipe the soul, but unfortunately for them, the soul is going to be the Gem Clone. So that really doesn't lead for anything outside of maybe Origin Breaker. But he guards himself. He guards our Gem Clones. He's a good addition. We can search him out pretty easily with the search card, specifically for Gem Clone and Zeta. We're only going to run him out of 4 because he's not the focus of the deck. The Gem Clone is. So starting our non-impact monsters, we're going to be running 2 copies of the Blade Beast Impact Monster, Mikazuki Munachika, Forbidden Art Blade Deity Descends. The reason why we're running him is he's an 825, so he hits great stats. He's a size 2. He gives double attack, penetrate, soul guard, and move on his own, regardless of his other abilities. The sole reason we're running it is because he just gives a myriad of abilities right off the bat. So any Gem Clone is going to be pretty rough to deal with. Following that, we're running 2 copies of Gideon. I guess that's how his name is. Steel Beast Explosive Battle Cry. He's an 837 with Penetrate and Soul Guard. Again, very versatile. High crit with Penetrate is really needed, especially in this meta with a lot of the walls we're dealing with. So we are going to be able to punch through pretty easily. Following him, we are running 2 copies of Drum Bunker Dragon, Drill Ram, Buster Break, 1036. He's got Penetrate and Soul Guard, and during your turn, he actually has an ability that we can use. During a battle that this card is attacking a monster on the center, your opponent cannot use counters. And when this monster deals damage to your opponent, destroy all cards on the opponent's field. So this is widespread destruction, save for a few decks that can't be touched via outside abilities. Putting this in Gem Clone, it doesn't matter what Gem Clone, you're dealing a hefty chunk of damage. Especially with that 10,000 power. The crit of 3 is really, really big, is really nice. And Penetrate with Soul Guard just is the icing on the cake. So we're running him at a 2-off. For 1-ofs, we're going to be running 1 copy of Schwartz Kruger the 8th. When he enters the field, destroy all monsters on your opponent's field. At the end of the battle, you can return this end of the battle with this card, return this card to your hand. So you can get him from the drop zone and put him into play via Gem Clone. Do a bit of field control, swing, and then pop him back to hand. The Gem Clone will, of course, go to the drop zone. However, I would recommend playing him only on Replica Wall. That way the Replica Wall can also come back too. So, Schwartz does have his place in this deck finally. Running 1 copy of Fake Black Dragon Abigail. Again, it's decent numbers and an 825. Pay 2, we don't have to worry about this. It's call cost. When this attacks and destroys an opponent's monster, put the top 3 cards in the opponent's deck into the drop zone and deal 3 damage. It's when it attacks and destroys an opponent's monster. Excuse me. When this card attack is nullified, deal damage. So if it swings and blows up a monster for field control, we mill them and burn them for 3. If they nullify the attack, they still get burned for 1. Free damage is free damage, and I'll always take that. So we're going to be running 1 copy of him. We're also running 1 copy of Daredevil Salamander Dragon. This was the BuddyFight Autumn Regional promo. 10,000 power with a crit of 2 and a defense of 5. Its abilities, if you have 10 or more cards in the drop zone, this card gets +1 crit. If your opponent has 10 or more, this card has +1 crit. So you can potentially and very easily get crit 4. Pairing it with some other cards, you can even get Penetrate. I'm looking at this to be an Origin Breaker, along with the Mizuzuchi or the Guardian. Just anything with Penetrate in general, along with this card. You have an outrageous amount of crit. When this card attacks, if there are 20 more cards in your drop zone and your opponent's drop zone, destroy all monsters, destroy all cards on the field other than this card. And for this turn, this card gets +4 crit. So this thing can pretty much end the game really quickly with its abilities. It needs a certain amount of cards in the drop zone. So I don't know if you'll be able to get that bottom effect, but you'll be able to get the 10 cards in both opponents' drop zone pretty easily by the time you get Origin Breaker out. So we're running this out of 1-of. Also at our 1-ofs, we're running Jackknife, Galactical Punisher. When this card enters the field, put up to 1 card from your drop zone into this card's soul. So we can also get Soul Guard. It's got Penetrate with 3 crit. It's very easy to put into play, giving any card that we play potentially Soul Guard of 2. How I look at it, when the damage dealt to your opponent cannot be reduced, and if it is attacking alone, they can still nullify, but they can't reduce it, so they can't, like White Dragon Shield or other card effects that just reduce damage. They can, however, nullify the attack. So, we got to take what we can get. Still very good with a 10,000 power, crit of 3 with Penetrate. Penetrate is very, very needed, and especially with these high power monsters, be able to push through the brick centers that we're seeing in the meta. We're still running meta 1-of. Following that, our final monster for the deck is Purgatory Knight Leader Demio Sword Dragon Executioner. Chaos Execution, excuse me. 8/2/4, so again, it hits for good numbers, has a decent crit. When this monster attacks and destroys an opponent's monster, stand the card. During your turn, you can destroy another monster on your field with Purgatory Knights in its name. So we're only really using this one to help clear the board really quickly. Repeated attacks. This also lets repeated attacks on the center happen, because if you destroy the monster via Origin Breaker or just with Gem Clone, there's something else in so to help power it up a little bit. I mean Origin Breaker, that is Origin Breaker. Excuse me. This just lets us repeatedly hit the center of the opponents repeatedly until they're done. This helps out quite a bit. I really wish we could give it Penetrate somehow, but, take what we can get. This just lets us help clear out brick wall centers. Moving on to spells, we have Artifact Talisman, Find Joker. We're running that at 4-of. This lets us search out a Zeta or a Gem Clone, meaning we can get roughly 10th to a quarter of the deck. Let's just search out what we need. My numbers are a little fuzzy, guys, so don't take that to heart. But this does let us get any Gem Clone we need. This does let us get the Zeta in case we need to transform into Zeta. Give us some barrier defense. So we're, of course, running that at a 4-of. We are, of course, going to be running 4 I've seen 3 moves. The Zeta variant. Open Center Shield. Next up, we're running 3 copies of Sacrifice Shield. This lets us mill 3 cards to prevent a monster to be destroyed. Sometimes we'll play close center. Sometimes we'll just try to get rid of the Gem Clone as quickly as possible. And this also lets us get stuff out of the drop zone. We do have some recurral, so this lets us get monsters back. If we have to play Jackknife, this fuels the monsters in the drop zone for the Soul Guard, so it's pretty versatile. Running 3 Gauge 3 because this deck does need Gauge. Unfortunately, this is one of the heavier Gauge consumings. I may actually just swap these out for Hyper Energies altogether. But right now, this is a counter speed Gauge Counter speed gauge 3, which is very, very good. Next up, we're running 3 copies of Draw 2. Pay gauge, draw 2 cards. This is counter speed. I can only play it if I have Zeta or Gem Clone. Very easy to pull off. So I just play Gem Clone, I play Zeta, I get draw 2. Next up, we're running 3 copies of Armor Talisman, gain Vantage. You can only cast this if you have a card with Zeta in its name on the field, and at the beginning of my main phase. You can only cast this if you have a card on your field at the beginning of your main phase. Put the top card of your deck into Engage, gain a life, then put up to 1 non-hero world impact monster from my deck into my hand, shuffle my deck, my main phase ends, and then proceeds to my final phase. So this lets me go and get any impact monster that's not hero world and immediately set up for plays with Gem Clone and put them in play for free with quotations. And gain a life and a gauge. We do need gauge. Life is always nice because it is, again, a glass cannon deck. So we are going to be running 3 of that. And then to round it out, we're going to be running 2 copies of the Ace Arrives. You may only cast this if you have 7 life or less. Put a monster from your drop zone into the soul of a card on your field or back to your hand. So the reason why I'm running this is this lets me recur any monster from the discard pile back to my hand, or if we have Origin Breaker, stack an additional ability into Origin Breaker by putting a card into its soul. So guys, that is my Gem Clone deck. It still may need a little work, but I'm pretty happy with how it's doing thus far. I want to thank you guys again for watching, and don't forget to like the video, subscribe, leave comments. I'm very open to feedback. I love working with the community, and we'll see you guys next time.